Oh, I don't have a microphone. I'm gonna have to yell. The air conditioner is actually working, maybe.
Pretty amazing. You have a question for Penny?
Yes, other than this isn't up, but we are online, we are on YouTube, we're ready to go.
Oh, it's 5:30.
Welcome, everyone. This is the City of Harbor Springs Planning Commission meeting, Thursday, August 20th. It is 5, depending on which clock you're looking at, 5:31 and a half, let's call it that. Jeff, can we do a roll call, please?
Yeah, Mark Finkelstein,
Here.
Barry Lustgarten, Bob Buckner,
Here.
Kenny Stewart,
Here.
Tony Johnson, Chip Everest,
Here.
Garen Goppigan.
Here.
We have a quorum. Let me quickly make a couple of announcements here. Two things. One, we have been having trouble where people on Zoom, when we unmute them, we still can't hear them, but the YouTube recording does. So I apologize for anybody that's on Zoom today that would like to make public comment. I'm not going to call on people on there because we won't be able to hear them. And I'm really sorry that we're having that audio visual trouble. The other thing that I would like to point out is we have some scam artists that have been reaching out to applicants to the city of Harbor Springs that submit, like the request for the special land use today, where someone online has been sending an invoice that looks like it's from the city that has nothing to do with the city, requesting that they go to a website or do some type of making a payment.
Right.
And so I just want to really reiterate, we've put stuff on Facebook, we've put some stuff on the city website, and I just want to reiterate that for planning commission purposes, we get our fees up front in check or cash. We will not ask you to do a money transfer. We will not wait until the day of the meeting to require further monies. We've had a lot of people doing this. It isn't just the city of Harbor Springs that is facing this issue. Emmett County has been having some challenges with this as well. So if you receive any type of bill from the city for planning commission, city council, or any other purposes, and if you have any question of whether it's legit, please reach out to the city and we'll verify that that is something that actually needs to be paid or not. I just wanted to take another opportunity to let people know that that is an issue that needs to be addressed. One last thing, Bob, Mr. Chair, if we could amend the agenda. We do have something that we would like to add, staff would. Normally, we have approval of the minutes. In the new code, we have a new step in the approval process for things, and that is after something has been approved or denied, that we have kind of a findings of fact document documenting the decision that we arrived at. And so for any of you, Bob and I yesterday went through and filled out, the attorney created a template for us and we filled out that document. I passed it out to you. I apologize that you have not had an opportunity to review it prior to the meeting. So what I would like to do is add in the section for approval of minutes would be a separate thing for the approval of the decision form. And so what we have here is one for a decision that we've just made recently at a previous meeting, which was the denial of the site plan for 289 East Main Street. So I would like everybody to take an opportunity to review that document and include that as a motion to approve if you feel that the document is appropriate and has the correct language in it. If we need to modify that, we can certainly do so and adjust it appropriately.
So are you recommending, Jeff, that we just take 5 minutes now and look at that?
Uh, yes.
Can you do that?
Yes, that makes it's up to that. So I think what we'll do, hopefully we'll hand him to introduce it. And an introduction, because there's a little bit of background here. There was a previous variance that was done a while ago. That will hand it over to the applicant to provide their input. Open it up for public hearing. Then I would recommend that at the end of public hearing, when they start their discussion, you could offer to review your memo and talk about it. And at that point, let's address the issue with the illustration versus the text system. If that makes sense. Hopefully it'll work out that way. Just briefly. Yeah.
The game is. And I made them.
You would let us know when you got through it and you're prepared to weigh in with an opinion, I would appreciate it.
Yes.
What is the status of this document now? Is this awaiting our concurrence?
That we agree with the comments made within here.
Yeah, I believe the intent of this document would be that, along with the minutes, we would approve this for any project moving forward that we have approved or denied, kind of a resolution of what the decision of the planning commission was. And, so, yeah, we're basically looking for you to affirm or a motion to approve of the document.
The generic document or?
No, this document with these, with the specific items on it for that project. We may, we may update the template moving forward. You know, but this was what we had. We kind of recognized that this was something that needed to be done with the new zoning code recently, and so we put something together. The content will probably remain very similar, but we might massage the template of the layout of it. And this just keeps cutting in and out, doesn't it?
Yes.
feel like some Jeopardy theme should be playing in the background.
See if one of these batteries is better.
Good. All right, does anyone, yes,
So I'd certainly start off the conversation. I think this is, except for one criteria, which we'll come back to, fairly accurate representation of our discussions, certainly concerns on parking during specifically. I want to draw attention to item B, site design characteristic. Somewhat of a subjective measure. The definition of the CBD is zero lot line. So character is subjective in that there are certainly large parts of the CBD that have no space between buildings. So I'm not totally convinced on B, but I think there are other points related to the two issues already mentioned that make me comfortable moving forward.
any other comments or thoughts?
Guess I have to borrow. Have my.
Oh, yeah. I changed the battery. Let's see if that helped or not.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. I share your concern. I think that it's sufficient, but I share your concern going forward. Similarly with item G, where it said the commission finding was a concern. And I think as part of the challenge you have with this format, it's really a go or no go. And item B and item G are also treated as go or no go, even though they may be perhaps more in the shade of gray area. But either way, it did capture the key elements that were difficult to present. Regarding.
Any other thoughts, comments? So in that context, planning commission, are we comfortable approving this along with the minutes? Are we all in favor
Or
or?
not quite, I promised myself I wouldn't talk so much tonight. But page 3 of the minutes, in the 3rd paragraph. If my copy anyway, it wasn't a complete sentence in the very first sentence.
Fourth, okay.
Fourth,
Or their
Property.
property owner question, should that be capital P or was there
Oh.
something missing? I don't know. About property owner?
oh, so that was during a public comment section, and I could not make out who the speaker was. So I just put property owner.
Okay,
Um,
capital P or add the for extra credit if you want.
yeah.
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes and the site plan approval document?
Site plan denial document
Site plan denial document.
Minutes as amended.
as amended.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, moving on. Next item on the agenda is comments from the public. Let me remind everyone that these comments should be concerning issues that are not on the agenda. And if you would be so kind as to limit your comments so that they do not exceed 30 minutes, 30 minutes. I really wish. Keep it.
They just do.
This would be better, so we'll leave it under 3 minutes, that would be good. Any comments from the public, please?
This is John Wayman, and this is not about the short-term rental.
Okay.
It's about the invoice. that you've been receiving that are bogus. I represented a utility in Ohio that had a similar problem. I turned the problem over because it came through the mail. I turned the problem over to the Postal Service. They investigated it. They ended up prosecuting the people that were doing it and putting them in jail. So if any of this goes to the US mail, contact the Postal Service.
Yeah, thank you. Any other public? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Pam Kaczynski, 465 State Street. The subject tonight is pattern books of planning tools. So as we all know, there's been a lot of debate recently about piles of condos and painting lamp books. So maybe it's time for the planning commission to write a pattern book for Harbor Springs, included in our master plan and in our codes. Lots of towns have these, it's not something new, so there's lots of examples out there. A pattern book describes the special features, lamppost colors, building scale, window styles, landscape, for example, just a few examples. And everyone can refer to them, whether they're building or deciding on codes or deciding on what they're going to put there. So they can make better choices about being Harbor Springs' unique character. It would describe in words and pictures the things we love about Harbor Springs because they make Harbor home. I found an article on pattern books on the Planning Commissioner's Journal website, and I printed out a copy of the law. I'll let you to you. And in fact, it's really interesting to read. So I think you'll enjoy it. Thanks.
Thank you. Wow. It's like Christmas. Not quite, but no reason. Other public comments? Really? Okay, great, I'll take that. So let's move on to old and new business. The first item on our agenda is a public hearing for 423 East Main, which is a special land use request to approve an accessory dwelling unit on the garage. And what I'd like to do is maybe ask Jeff to tee up what is actually at stake here, what's being contemplated, and give us some background on this.
Okay. Kenny, could I have the microphone? Hi, so the property owner currently has an existing one-story garage with a very small little loft above it. I think there might be a little bit of living space in it, but with the extent of the height of the roof as it currently exists, there was no need when it was built to get special land use approval at that time. One thing that I would like to point out is we can see here the existing setbacks for the property, and that the existing garage and the proposed garage do not meet that. There was a zoning board of appeals decision in the past, I think around 2002, where they went and received a variance to extend beyond the setback. So for our purposes of conversation tonight, we don't have to worry about the setback issue and them not being in compliance because the ZBA has already made a decision on that. We're simply looking at the standards that would apply for special land use approval for the project as if it met that zoning. And I don't believe that they're proposing to change the footprint of the building. But Michelle Presnell, the architect, is here and she can go into more detail about what the property owner would like to do and whatnot, if we'd like to hand it over to her for.
Yes, that's good. So Michelle, if you'd like to provide something, if you don't mind, please. And just identify yourself.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Cozell. I'm an architect for this project. As Jeff mentioned, this was a garage that's been existing for maybe 25 years or so on Third Street. The property runs between Third Street and Main Street where there is a primary residence. The owner approached me and asked about expanding the space on the upper level of the garage for potential either family to stay there or potential perhaps healthcare assistance in the future. So we created a small space upstairs, stair access, bathroom, small kitchenette, very simple kind of thing. For personal use, not for short-term rental, clearly. The special land use application I went through, Ken did a review and I'm sure you have that in your package. Part of that, I just wanted to clarify, one of the things was the utility plan. I did not provide a utility plan. There is an existing bathroom in the garage on the main level. So there is existing water, sewer, and electrical to this building. We do not propose any changes to that. So we're already hooked up to the sewer, we're already hooked up to water, etc. So it's kind of the same as the drainage. We're not changing the, the building itself, or as far as the amount of water that's impacting the site, like we're not changing anything around the building. The idea is that we literally would take off the top of the building and put a new top on the existing garage. There was a little bit of, evidently there are some conflicting, there's some conflicting information in the zoning code currently on how building heights are determined. There's some language that describes it in the definition. And then there are some images that diagram how buildings are meant to be measured. You'll notice that on my east elevation, I'm showing the high point of the grade, the low point of the grade, and a median point. This is kind of in line. There's with the diagram that's on page
160, I think.
162.
162.
162 of the zoning code, which has basically this diagram showing the median and then to the midpoint between the peak and the east of the roof. So technically, according to the diagram in this zoning code and my drawing, the building is actually 20 feet, 2 inches tall. Even though from the street side, it's 25 feet, 6 inches from the sidewalk to the peak, which might be in line with the definition of a building height. So at any rate, there's just been, Jeff and I were on the phone for about 20 minutes today, and I mean, there's a conflict. So I determined the height based on the diagram that's in the zoning code, and it's my explanation. So, do you have any questions about the project or?
Yeah, so what is on the second level of that now? I went and looked at it and there's an air conditioner in that window. Is that occupied?
It's not being used. So this is a residence or a property that was recently purchased and changed hands in the last couple of years. The previous owner had used that as a puzzle making room.
Oh.
So there's like a table with some puzzles. There's nothing else up there. It's just attic trusses, which kind of normally they probably were built it was probably built as storage.
Okay.
There's an existing stair to get up to that level. It is not a stair that beats today's building code standards.
All right.
So that stair would have to be rebuilt.
Is there plumbing and other utilities extended to that level?
No, just electric.
Okay, now,
So-
Kathy, is that all right with how we determine, do we need to see what that's gonna look like?
I think based on the explanation from Michelle, the architect, that there is an existing bathroom in that structure and that the utility connection is really not going to change. If the planning commission is okay with that, I think you can waive the requirement to have that depicted on a plan.
In the existing building envelope.
Yeah.
Everybody comfortable with that?
Well, how do we get around the height thing?
Let me provide a little bit more detail on that. If we look at the definition, it says that we measure the height to the highest point of the roof. But when you look at the illustration that we then refer to, The illustration clearly points out that you measure to the average of the roof pitch. So we have a clear inconsistency there.
Clearing.
Well, I mean, it clearly they conflict with each other, I guess is the better. So the question is, how would you like to address that at this time, knowing that we have a little bit of an inconsistency? We've known that we have some issues with some of the illustrations that we need to go back. That's part of one of the things that we're looking at doing as we get into the other issues that we're going to be looking at in the zoning code. And we need to do this. So, but for tonight, I guess the question comes up of how do we want to handle it? Even if we look at the other portion, we're off by 6 inches. The building height limitation is 25. They're at 25 feet, 6 inches. So I think you have a couple of ways that you can address this tonight. You could say that the written text takes precedent and that they don't meet it. You could say that the illustration takes precedent and that they do. If there's no other issues, you could then approve the project based on the illustration. If you feel that the written text takes precedent, you could move forward with the project in a couple of ways. You could request that they modify their drawing and bring back a drawing that shows that they comply. Or if you have no other issues, if we get through the public hearing portion of this process, and this is the only thing left to debate and discuss, if you're comfortable, you could say that you're approving the special land use, but not the site plan itself, and that the site plan would be approved administratively by the zoning administrator when he gives the zoning permit.
I ask a question to you. Is it a hardship to take 6 inches off that?
No, I can take 6 inches off. I mean, I didn't, this was not a.
Right, it
Had I
wasn't
known that that was
intentional.
my top, then I would have designed it to 21 feet.
I just think from,
That was
if
not
it's
the
a
way.
hardship, then we
everybody
can't
felt.
do it, then we have to have more discussion, I think. If it's not a hardship, we should go by the 10. That's what you think.
Go ahead.
There is a provision too that says if there's a conflict, text controls over graphics and tables. But that being said, you know, there is a conflict, and if the way the code used to be interpreted, you went by the diagram, you know, it's something the planning commission to talk about. But I agree with Jeff. I think the planning commission, if you're inclined, you could prove this at a height not to exceed 25 feet. You know, we don't have to postpone a decision, and leave it for staff to just verify that.
Thanks.
Okay. You're here.
Good evening, Michelle. Thanks. Question for you, and I wish Vanessa were here. So I know you're not changing the footprint,
Mhm.
but you are changing the roof pitches. So what used to be a gable, south and north, now you're adding shed roofs and gables. Is that going to impact drainage? Because your west elevation, I think, is all cement. So changing all those roof pitches, are you going to have water flowing in a way that's not there now that could cause a problem?
So on, I believe it's the page where there's a plan. I'm showing a drainage plan, so what we're planning to do is just pull the water where it goes now, which there are a couple of gutters that run along the east and west sides. You're right, there's just a gable right now, and so over on this side, Jeff, I don't know if you can pull it that way or not. There you go. So I've got the existing drainage plan and proposed drainage plan. The same amount of water is falling on this roof. And we're gonna push that water to the same exact spots in the downspouts.
Okay,
So we're gonna gutter it.
okay, so you are managing, because it's
Yes.
gonna flow differently.
Yeah, we're gonna manage the water.
But
Mhm.
you think you're under control and we're not gonna have an issue with water, especially on the west elevation.
True.
Thanks.
I'm an engineer. I have a nerdy question regarding building height. I don't have the code in front of me. Does our height limit say 25 feet? Or is it like 25 feet, 0 inches?
25 feet.
So presumably 25 feet, 5.9 inches would be 25 feet.
Rounding, if you round, I get.
If we don't say 0.0 or 0 inches, it would have to round to the nearest one. That's the way, that's the way, measurement works. You gotta have a definition for your, if it said 25 feet, 0 inches, then that's clear. It says 25 feet, you can go up. Laws of science and engineering say round, you have to round. So just as a point of clarification.
I have a question.
Interesting.
What is the height of the main house? That I am unsure of. I can provide that information to Jeff if you'd like, but it's a two-story house. So it has to be taller. This is a 1.5 story garage.
And is there something in the code that the accessory building has to be
Shorter,
yes, so it falls.
Do
in line
we
with
keep
that.
that as?
Right, but we're not talking about sea level, right?
House.
Because that side of the garage.
I think it's higher.
So I think that would be my question.
No, it wasn't even on my radar. I do know that needs to be shorter. There's no way that house is less than 25 feet.
And that was my, I agree with that. I went by, you're exactly right. The ADU cannot exceed the height of the primary residence. But in driving by the site, the house is definitely over 25 feet. Yeah.
So I saw one comment letter, saying it's good. Are there any other comment letters that are made?
I did not receive any correspondence from anybody else, but this is probably a prime opportunity. This is a public hearing, and so we should have a motion to open the public hearing and get feedback from anybody in the community that's here today.
Committee members, do you have any other questions? Michelle, okay, then if that's the case, then can I get a motion to open the public hearing?
So move.
Okay. All right. Audience, any comments that you'd like to offer as it relates to this project? All right. Go on.
Quick question, who seconded that motion? Jeannie?
I'm Karen Monfield, West Stratton Township. The former owners of this building, home and the garage were clients of ours, and they couldn't have done a nicer job with the renovation and all the work that they did around. And I know that the new buyers are going to be the same kind of neighbors. It's a really special house, and everything that we've seen that's taken place there has been really, really well done. Thank you.
Others? Last chance. Okay, can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion closed.
I'll second. Good. All right, so the public comments is closed. Planning Commission. Let's have a conversation about this. How do we feel about the project? How would you like to proceed?
I like the project. I like what Mark suggested. I like what Mark suggested about redesigning it to 25 feet. And then let the zoning administrator actually look at that. So,
Chip, this is hard to believe, but I agree. No, I think that's a good call. Kenny?
I agree, and thank you for your consideration on the height, because I realize we could have a fight on our hands, wanted to defend or lobby one portion of the code. Meanwhile, we have another homework assignment to go back and clean up the diagram versus the text to be absolutely certain. I do like the passage about the text over rules, but I think we need more. But overall, to the project, I'm very comfortable with it.
Aaron?
I agree. I'm comfortable with it. If Michelle can bring it down 6 inches, she's comfortable with drainage. We're from a professional level, drainage is satisfied. I don't see why we wouldn't approve it.
I'm comfortable.
Great. Barry?
I had the same concerns as Garen as far as the new roof line, so it sounds like that was addressed and I'm good with that. And then the existing funding, since it was already there, not having that plan is, I'm fine with the existing. I'm good with funding.
Thank you.
I agree.
It sounds like we're in agreement. Can I get a motion to approve with the caveat that we're going to require the building height to be brought down to 25 feet max?
Move.
Aye. Dave, Steve, is that- All right, all those in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Great. Let's move on to the next issue, which is zoning code language for the central business district. We kicked this around, this is the second iteration of it. And, Ken, I was wondering if I could ask you to provide a brief overview of what you've done with the most recent iteration of the draft.
Certainly. You can also, pardon, Chair, but you also clarify what we have in front of us versus what was in the packet.
Yeah, so what was in the packet was the amendment that's the subject of the public hearing, but it was a clean copy, meaning the changes were not highlighted. So what I passed out this evening was a red line copy that highlights the changes. So it's the exact same language. The document that I passed out just shows the changes, but if I can, I'll walk through those.
Yeah.
So everyone, watching and hearing tonight can understand that.
And this is changes relative to the doc that you handed out at our last meeting,
Correct. And
7:30 meeting.
yes, and it's also, I'm walking through the draft that was included in the meeting packet as well, labeled Planning Commission Public Hearing Draft 8/20/2026.
Great.
So the changes, on first one there on page 1 is we're adding under 3.1.1 new subsection C with the intent of clarifying that parking spaces, which is a defined term under the ordinance, will be allowed as an accessory use, and it will be designated by the symbol A on the regulated use table. On page 2, this is talked about last time, under the public, quasi-public section, there is a definition in the zoning ordinance for a parking facility, but it wasn't allowed anywhere in the code. So we added parking facility to the table along with designations where it would be allowed as a permitted use and a use by special land use approval. And those are highlighted in red as well on the portion that I handed out. On page 3, we talked about last time, private parking lots was a use that was included in the table. But the only places it was allowed, it was as a special use in B1 and as a permitted use in B2. So we talked about adding it as a special land use in ROS, CBD, WF, and I1. On page 4, this is a little different in that the city attorney reviewed the draft that I had prepared. And initially I had the new designation parking spaces under the commercial, right under private parking lots. And he suggested, let's make that its own category so as not to confuse people in thinking that it's only allowed for commercial uses, because we talked about this is going to allow people to have the parking spaces, which is defined to be less than 3, whatever's required by Article 6 for all the uses in all the zoning districts. So parking spaces on page 4 is now a new subcategory, and then all the zoning districts have that A designation. Switching now to the CBD district 3.4.10. We talked about changing the maximum height to 30 feet. and I apologize, I had also thought we were removing the language about the roof, the exception for the rooftop mechanical. So I show that as being stricken out, but we can put that back. That was my bad note taking. And then the new language underneath that maximum height, that rooftop decks are still allowed, but the top of the railing cannot exceed that 30-foot maximum height. Then on page 5, we added a category for maximum number of stories being 2. And then under the additional requirements, this is subsection B, 1 and 2 are existing language. 3 and 4, the planning commission had designated as to, let's save that for further discussion. But when the city attorney reviewed this, he suggested, and maybe Jeff can elaborate on that, he suggested adding those in for clarification purposes. So that would require number 3, as it says there, a minimum of 60% of the ground floor of the building would have to, for a use that includes residential units on upper floors, you'd have to have that designated for retail or public use. As I mentioned last time, there is a definition for both of those in the ordinance. So I can read those aloud if you'd like. The retail is, I think, self-explanatory. The public, that might not be what the planning commission's thinking or envisioning. So let me know if you want me to read that. And then number 4 there, if it's a use that has residential units on the upper floors, this would allow a maximum of 25% of the ground floor area to be used for parking, subject to a special use approval. And Jeff, I don't know if you can elaborate on that.
I think that Ken did a great job of talking about that. I would recommend that we have a small discussion on line item 3, where we specify floor the 60% rule for the first floor. Is right now says retail or public. I think we might want to at least discuss changing retail to say commercial. There are a number of uses that are permitted within the central business district that are commercial uses, but are not under the subcategory of retail, such as bakeries or some other things. So that you could interpret this to say that if a building has a second floor, it can't have a bakery on the first floor. So I would, at least let's discuss changing retail to just say commercial. Whatever you guys would prefer, we can go with. But I think would be a minor change, but still something at least worth discussing.
We didn't decide on 60%, 25% last time. So that is kind of a big change in terms of us deciding. We didn't decide, and then now it's here.
We can pull those 2 sections out.
Why did you want it? Definition.
It addresses some of the issues that were concerns of yours with past decisions. So I think it was just, since we've based decisions and included that logic in our thinking, that he said, well, let's just see if we can't codify. We did talk about this. We didn't have it originally in the list of stuff for the public hearing, but I think we were just hoping that we could maybe get more of a consensus of if you like that idea or don't like it. If you're not ready to include that and you want to have more discussion, we can pull that out.
The version of the draft that was advertised for the public hearing did include that language, but you're right.
Yeah.
It wasn't something the planning commission said, add this in. That came after the city attorney reviewed it.
Well, let's, I'm going to suggest, before we get too much into the weeds on this, that we solicit a motion to open up the public hearing for public comment on this and see what the public has to offer on this issue. And then once we've heard from the public, then we can discuss this at length. So anybody from the public that would like to offer comments on this issue?
Do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I have a question. Is it time for me to talk? It's time for you to talk.
Thank you for bearing with me. I'm gonna do this slow so I don't screw it up. My name's Hank Schneider. My family and I have lived in Harbor Springs for 32 years. We're major stakeholders and supporters of this community. And like everybody that's sitting here, this is our happy place. I happen also to be the owner and developer of 289 East Main Street. I want to begin by stating that I support thoroughly thoughtful planning and reasonable zoning standards. However, I'm concerned about both the substance of the proposed changes and the timing under which it's being considered. According to my counsel, my application for 289 East Main was submitted in full compliance with your zoning code. You still denied the application, and you're now considering new and more restrictive standards that will directly prohibit the development that I proposed. The commission is now discussing 30-foot heights, 2-story maximum, significant restrictions on private parking, minimum ground level retail requirements, and potentially additional limitations on lot coverage. As you know, these are all changes that would specifically stop my development. I'm also concerned about the appearance that zoning changes of this magnitude are being advanced, while a specific application was already in review. Your proposed changes of these zoning ordinances seem to me to be specifically designed to stop my development. Good planning policies should establish forward-looking standards, not change the rules after an application has been submitted. I relied on current existing zoning code when I submitted my application. This is why I oppose the proposed changes that are being adopted to stop my development, and why I request that my application, which was submitted in full compliance with the zoning code that is and was in effect at the time, that you review this fairly and that those existing standards with it without being affected while you're trying to adopt, while you've put in a moratorium. When a property owner follows the rules, submits the application, and invests significant time and resources in reliance of those rules, it is important that the city apply those rules consistently and fairly. How can a city deny a plan that conforms to all the requirements laid out by that city? If someone submits a plan that is in line with all the zoning requirements and it is denied, what's the reasoning behind that? How is this to be explained to the developer and the community at large? If a city, any city, can deny an application that is 100% in accordance with its own zoning code, how can anyone who wants to develop or invest in a community feel confident that they can trust that plan submitted and that it'll be honored in accordance with the rules of the community that created it themselves?
Thank you. Other public comment? Yes.
Rick Tarczynski, 465 State Street. In regards to number 3, I think it would be a better consideration to keep it as retail rather than commercial. I think with commercial, you're going to end up with more real estate offices, lawyers, things that don't necessarily attract traffic. The CBD should be retail, and that feeds off of each other. So I would like to see a consideration of keeping that retail. Thank you.
Anything else from the public?
Wendy Reed, 188 East Main Street. The Tires own 2 buildings on Main Street. I bought the County Gallery building in 1988 for $335,000. It is a first floor retail space with a full walkout basement for storage. It was lot line to lot line to lot line. I could put on a second floor for a second stream of income, but I own no parking to go with that apartment. Any person renting that space has to play roulette with the city police and the snowplows. Pierre Bitar bought the Rosenthal building in 1992 for $260,000 from the bank in foreclosure. The building was in horrible condition, and he tore it down and rebuilt it. The 1992 Planning Commission had two demands. The building could not exceed the 30-foot height requirement, and it must provide 3 parking places. The current building is a retail space with a 10-foot ceiling and a full concrete block wall basement with an 8-foot ceiling. It has a second floor condo with an 8-foot ceiling. And what you don't know is it has a 3rd floor space that serves as storage space for the apartment with a 7-foot ceiling. It is where the furnace and the water heater are located. If you don't put those in the attic, where are they going to go in your 2nd floor? It is 30 feet high with the air conditioners located on the roof below the 30-foot peak. And most importantly, to the value of the building, it does have 3 parking spaces. The value of the County Gallery building is approximately $1 million in 2026. Due to the parking issue, it is constrained in value and the tenant must bear the weight of the mortgage. So you have to consider who's going to be able to be in that building and pay that kind of money. The Pierre Bitar building is worth far north of $1 million due to the usable retail space with the storage space, as well as the usable apartment with the storage space for the apartment. And the off-street parking makes it over the top. The point of this is to point out the value of parking adds to any building in the central business district. I urge the Planning Commission to stick to the 30-foot height restriction, but you should reconsider your verbiage regarding the number of stories a building is allowed. What do you care how many stories are downtown as long as the height restriction is met? In considering the value of a commercial building, more income streams make it easier to find a retail tenant who can afford to pay the rent the building owner will need the space to generate. You also have not considered roof gardens, placement of air conditioners, height of stairways to access a roof garden, and the height of a roof garden railing. All of these things are important to the usefulness of any building downtown. But the most important consideration has to be given over to the importance of parking.
Thank you. Other comments? And I would elicit a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll
Second. All right, well, that's, you know, said.
Before you take a vote, can I have a question?
Who seconded that? So
Have you ever done an overlay to show what all these restrictions would cause to any property, not my property, but any property in downtown and any future development that's in the downtown? Have you thought about that? Have you talked to a single retailer in town and asked them what they think? If you talk to the DDA and ask them what they think about putting 60% or 5,000 more feet of retail space in this town, people only make money 3 months a year unless they own the building and own the business. You sit here and you make judgments about retail. What do any of you know about what those retailers are going through during the months of January, February, March, and April? Do you give a shit? And if you give a shit, then you should go and you should find out. You should talk to them. You should do an overlay. You should see what you're proposing will do to this property and any property today, tomorrow, and when you're all in my nursing home. Okay? You really need to take a look at this. Don't sit in this room and make decisions based on what you're talking about. Go out, look at the property, talk to the retailers. They are not going to be happy if you put 5,000 more feet. I own 6 retail spots in town. They're probably the cheapest rent in town. Okay? Because I know I want to keep them full. What do you think will go in here? Everything that would go in here would be a duplicate of something that is downtown. So not only are you going to struggle for 3 months during the year because you have competition, but it's going to go on forever. We'll all be gone. It'll still go on forever. You need to do a little more research before you put stuff like this on paper.
The public hearing is closed. All right, Planning Commission. My first question is. If there are any changes to this document, we can't even approve this today, right?
I don't think that's the case. I think if you make small minor changes, you can still make a recommendation to send it to council. If the extent of the changes, become more dramatic, where it changes the nature of the document, if we're adding a whole paragraph of new text or something, then we would certainly need to extend the public hearing, to another meeting where we would review that revised text. Ken, do you have anything more to add on that?
I agree. And, you know, I'd note that if that was a mistake, if it was a mistake to take out the exception for the rooftop mechanical equipment, that can be put back in. That was a typo or a miscue on my part. The planning commission didn't express an intent to take that out. So that would not be a significant change that would require another public hearing. If you wanted that put back in, as it reads, you know, existing with the 35-foot height, we can do that.
Just for consistency, items 3 and 4 on page 5, I think you want to take the S off of floors because there can only be one upper floor if we're limiting to 2 stories.
Good point.
So my question again is about 3 and 4. I understand the 60 and 25% are essentially flood values for now to remain a conversation. Is there any case history, other communities that have a provision like this that you can reference that help us in making a decision here?
I didn't research that, so I would be amiss to just say yes. I don't know. I can certainly research it, but that language was just intended for discussion purposes. It was added back in, at the request of the city attorney. So I didn't flush it out any further than it's stated.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other than the 60%, what else is allowed on the ground floor for the structure? So obviously it could be maximum of 25 for parking, but if there's no parking or the additional 15%, what do we have allowed with that first floor?
What would be allowed in CBD? So, that would be an allowable use in the remainder of that space. This was specifically designating it, and that would be the other commercial uses, as Jeff mentioned. Those would be allowable uses. This specifically retail or public has to be 60% as written.
Judy, any thoughts?
I like Tony's question of what have other towns done, how have they handled it? I'm so visual, it's hard for me to see what 60% and what else would go there. To Barry's question as well, so I think that's where I am.
My personal perspective, I do like, with respect, I like the idea of commercial rather than retail. I don't know why we would want to, for example, prevent a restaurant, which is technically not retail, from going into the first floor, or a bakery, as you pointed out, those sorts of things. So to me, I think commercial is, retail is a subset of commercial, and I understand your concern about real estate offices and that sort of thing, but I mean, we cannot legislate who's going to be using certain spaces. So I would say let's change it to commercial.
I like your idea that commercial be with 60% and 25% for placeholder, and I don't really have any sort of contact with those medical needs. These are the other communities. Yeah, I'm concerned about that.
Yeah. One question that somebody did pose to me is 60 and 25 doesn't add up to 100. And so one thing that I want to point out about that is, let's say that you have a building and 25% of it is devoted to parking. and then you have 60% devoted to commercial public use. That other 15%, there needs to be some type of access to that second floor. Stairwell, elevator, that would probably be where that other 15% would be, is some type of access to the upper floor. Right. The other, yeah.
Yes, I just go through from the beginning. I'm comfortable with the changes. I do think that we need the rooftop mechanical statement back in. That was our intent. This is just me talking, not for the whole group. Commercial instead of retail, I do understand your point, but I think commercial is probably a better, broader use. We want broad understanding. My hunch, and it's only a hunch, is that if I were a lawyer, and I'm not, I would always want more definition. So I would propose 3 and 4 be included. However, you may or may not know how hard those numbers of 60 and 25 were, because those were placeholders in order for us to start the diet. I'm not comfortable with those numbers because of the adding to 100%. Now we're starting to design buildings. And number 2 is these numbers are scalable, and sometimes what we think is a good idea for a larger project may not work for a smaller, and vice versa. I just don't know. Sitting here, I don't know, and so it's hard for me to sign up for those specific numbers. Therefore, it's hard for me to sign up for 3 and 4 at this time. I do think it's worthy of a hearty debate for the future, but finally, I just go back to the moratorium. It was about heights and storage. And then we decided that because of the parking conflict within the code, we wanted to address that, which I think we've done well. 3 and 4 are above and beyond that realm. We should debate it, but I don't think we're ready to put it into driving.
Can I throw out a question here? Since we're talking about items 3 and 4, without items 3 and 4, let me play devil's advocate, worst case scenario. Would you be comfortable if someone submitted a site plan to build a 2-story building that was 30 feet tall, that had 2, 3, 4 residential units on the second floor, and the first floor was completely parking?
There's no parking allowed in CP.
Well, we're proposing to make some changes to allow parking.
With this
Right.
changes, it would be allowed under special use.
It might be allowed under special use, but without item 4, parking could be the entire first floor. So I want you to keep that in mind that's kind of the reason why it was suggested to us to include this at this time.
There's a train of thought that placeholder, I mean, like codify the placeholder, and then we can talk about the placeholder later or the number later.
Well, I think it was, add this language to the code to codify it. But certainly if, anything in the code, if we work with this, it goes into the document 2 or 3 years later, we get an application and it's just not working out, and 60 doesn't work, we need to increase that or decrease that or whatever. We can always make changes, right? Nothing that we do is completely set in stone that can never be changed again.
Go ahead. Could we? So, I mean, CBD is basically down Main Street, right? I don't know. It goes on to 3rd Street. But could we? I mean, I'm just not comfortable with the 60 and 25, but I would be comfortable with saying that commercial would be required on Main Street. But I just think, to Kenny's point, on a scalable level, 25% may, on a small parcel, may not be enough for a parking space for a building that, is a smaller building. So, and we don't know that. We haven't done overlays, to your point, that would prove it does or does not. So I'm not comfortable with these percentages. On 3, I'd be comfortable with Main Street as commercial. And parking is again special use, so it has to go through a discussion approval process. So we do have the ability to, restrict that to some extent. So I'm not comfortable with the 60 and 25 either, approving that at this point.
Okay. I have a thought, your comment about 25% may not be enough. We have some language, when we look at residential properties, we state that accessory buildings cannot exceed 75% of the principal building. But there are certainly instances where the principal building may be extremely small, and an accessory building at 75% of that may not even be enough for a one-car garage. So in that area, we do have language that says that an accessory building shall not exceed 75%, but there will always be an allowance for at least 576 square feet for an accessory building, which is essentially a 24 by 24 two-car garage. So we could do something like that here of 25% maximum, but always allowing for at least some square footage that would be enough space for like one parking space or two, if you felt that there was a number that appropriate for that. It could be an answer to address that concern.
I go back to, I like that discussion, and I'm gonna go back to number 3, and I think we're forgetting, this is a minimum of 60. And I think Jeff drew a good analogy of what if the whole first floor were a parking lot? This says that a minimum of 60 in a building has to be retail or commercially used. So I don't think that's a bad idea. I mean, I'd like to hear some discussions on the contrary if you don't agree with that, but I think that provision that maybe Attorney Raymer was thinking of makes sense. It's a minimum, it's not a max. That's what you get to your 100. It could be 70, could be 75. But I think putting that type of parameter on a first floor will always guarantee a foot traffic and a viable CBD and not storage, cars filling a whole first floor. My thought.
Back to Kenny's point of design buildings. What if we made it add up to 100% and made it 75-25? Would that make any sense?
I don't know. You're asking me, I don't know, by hard and fast percentages, we're dictating the proportions of a footprint we don't know.
Right.
I think that my thought on that, we need to provide a little bit of that.
Okay.
Right, yeah, so there's gotta be some room for the elevator and stairs. I like Mark's comment on retail on Main. Sorry, commercial retail, yes, commercial. So I think that's worth thinking about. Recognizing that the whole block is within the city. If it extends forward or backwards to either the third or bay, I wonder whether that has consideration that it should be on the other side as well. The side streets, I think I'm a little less concerned about retail or commercial. So I think it's worth exploring that thought.
So what would your recommendation be then? What would the wording on what you recommend?
You know, but I do like that. Certainly facing Main is the commercial space. I think we have to recognize that CBD is more than just Main Street.
tried to do this when we haven't had the talk about setbacks or percentage of coverage, so I'm kind of tough. It's kind of a whole circle of how we do this, I'm not sure.
Well, no, I understand, but you were at council meeting on Monday, and council was wanting this to be
Yes, yes,
resolved, and the moratorium is two issues,
yes,
building height and then this.
yes, I think we have to think
Well, you have,
visuals, we have to figure out how it would all look.
I agree with you, but I think that is not something that can happen. I mean, it's gonna take a long time to determine whether or not we're gonna have an architectural review committee and what the setbacks ought to be and that sort of thing. In the meantime, we can't just have a moratorium on any development in downtown. Is we got to make a decision on this 30-foot 2-story issue. The moratorium cannot go on.
No, I agree with you on that, I just didn't, I'm trying to look at the big picture and make a decision accordingly.
Right.
And Jeff mentioned this initially, that, you know, if the planning commission determines to delete 3 and 4, that would be a permissible change that would not require another public hearing. Or that would be a tweak that would be allowed to move this forward.
Can I ask a question? If we as a group, begin to get comfortable around 3 as is, just for now, for talking purposes, but we eliminated 4, what would be the implications to that? The implications are someone could have 40% of the first floor as non-public commercial use, right? That's
But we do have the private parking facility would be allowed, but it's allowed by special use. So there would still be oversight by the planning commission.
okay, so that would require all the gates of the special use, public forum. et
Public
cetera.
hearing, exactly.
Public hearing.
Yeah.
So, and it seems like the consternation is on 4, if we're comfortable with 3. And this is Attorney Raymer saying, hey, these guardrails are probably logical. What do you see as the downside? Because I'm not sure, I get Jeff's point, but I think that's solvable in a small building. I'm just not, it's still subject to approval as a special use. Why, where's the downside to this?
It might be, you know, if without some kind of a minimum square footage, if 25% might not be enough parking for residential uses on the upper floors. That'd be the only downside I could think of. But, you know, maybe that number, that 25% number is the sticking point here.
Are you thinking that a larger number from 25, 30%, 35 be better, or do we just not like the idea of having a maximum for that at all?
I think the guardrail makes sense. I don't know if it's 25%, but let's say it is 25%. Could an applicant, because it's a special use anyway, is there anything we could do for an applicant in that scenario if it didn't work? Which would seem odd, but if it didn't, what's the applicant's recourse?
I think it's the same as any other section of the zoning code where something isn't working for the applicant. They have 2 options. One, they could come to the planning commission and recommend that the planning commission make a change to the code to modify it for their project so that their project could work. Or if they feel that they have a hardship, they could go to the zoning board of appeals and ask for a variance. I need to have X amount of parking for my property. The zoning code isn't allowing that. I feel that there are aspects of my site that make it so that the zoning code doesn't really work for me as the same way it does for other properties, and that therefore it might be appropriate for the zoning board of appeals to allow me to bend that rule a little bit to get reasonable use of my property. Those would be the two options that someone could do.
Like that, I think it's logical. Is there a reason why we think that guardrail, because some guardrails should be there. And I think Mr. Lane's agreeing, did the commissioners not think that a guardrail in that, a number 4 is needed? Because I think we need something.
To your point, what if we settled on some version of number 3, and let's say that number 3 exists. But then in number 4, I think we talked about this some time ago, is that basically you codify it to say that any parking in the CBD is subject to special land. Now, what that would do is it would force someone's today by right to have an apartment with a parking space on first floor to have to come in for special land use. But then, you know, we would see the merits of the project, the fact that they have to address parking somehow. And then we would decide on that project. So essentially what I'm saying is every time there's first floor usage within the CBD, it involves parking that's not city run, like a city lot, then we have the rights to review that specific project involving parking. It's definitely, it's an idea. Yes.
Don't we have that anyway?
Yeah.
Based on the table?
There would be
You
one,
do, yeah.
there would be one small change, because parking lots are for areas of parking that are 3 or more parking spaces. So we would need to make one change on the parking spaces line in the CBD section. We would change that from an A for accessory to an S for special, would be the one thing. So that could be another way to address that. So is the idea then to keep 3, remove 4, but change parking spaces in CBD from an A to an S? Is that what you were trying to describe, or did I
Yeah.
mistake it?
I guess I'm saying the same thing differently. Number 4 would be changed to specifically state that a parking space, not a lot and not a facility, but a parking space falls under the purview of special land use that's within CBD.
Yeah, and we would do that on the uses table.
On the uses table, but then my thought is that if you have that in the uses table, then the language of number 4 may not.
It would just be clarification. I mean, if you struck a maximum of 25% of and just started that sentence with the ground floor area of any building proposed, and it just make it clear that if someone overlooks it in the use table, it's kind of in their face in that section.
I open it up for.
Yeah,
It's an idea.
to me, it's redundant, but if that makes everyone feel better, that's all right.
It's definitely redundant.
Playing devil's advocate, is there a negative for that? I like the idea.
Modified number 4.
Yeah, making it special land use and the CBD.
It's just basically repeating what's already in the,
Right.
Okay.
repeating what's already in the chart.
I don't.
And I guess go back to the 60%. How did we come up with that number and why is that the right number? I don't have the answer for that.
I'm not sure that I know how you answered it, to be honest. Do you have any thoughts?
That number came from somebody on the commission.
No, I
that
get
night.
that. We probably just pulled it out of our ass.
Right.
Yeah. What, is there a way to provide some quantitative assessment as to whether or not that's the right percent?
Let's think about it maybe another way. If we remove the 25% maximum from line 4, and Jeannie asked the question, what's the negative? What's the potential downside? The cap. So if someone came in and said, I would like special land use for parking spaces on the first floor, without item 3, there's no hard cap to how much of the first floor could be parking. With 3, requiring whatever percentage that might be, that's going to be the hard cap. So if you remove the 25, then in theory, 40%, the non-60, could be through special land use approval, parking. So if approved through special land use, right? So there is that discussion, but having whatever percentage is there in 3 would essentially become the hard cap that affects how much, because parking would not be commercial. Yeah, it's the governor. So whatever you put there, whether you want that to be more forgiving and say 50, be more strict and say 75, that's up to you on whatever you feel is comfortable with that. But I guess that would be the other side effect of having that minimum, is it then affects your parking or anything non-commercial.
Got a question for you. It sounds to me like the committee members are struggling with whether or not 60% is the right percent. Do you have any thoughts as to how we could get comfortable with whatever percent it should be?
I think to Commissioner Johnson's point, we have to look and see what other communities, how they've handled this issue and what percentage of their ground floor in these types of buildings is devoted to commercial use. I mean, that would be one way to analyze it.
Right. Well, if we do that, we're punting on approval, right?
You could just strike out 3 and 4 too, and if you're comfortable with the remainder of the language, you know, we can always revisit the other items.
I
I
mean, I don't know if this would work, but could we say instead of 60%, a portion of the ground floor area of the building proposed to include residential units on upper floors must include commercial or public use?
How much? What portion?
And then,
Yeah, closet.
5%?
No.
10%?
we need to come up with standards for the planning commission to evaluate.
I mean, one way to do it, possibly a minimum. Something to do the frontage of the property. A percentage of the frontage of the property. I just don't know that 60%. I don't know, for us to decide on a percentage today. To me, difficult.
If you're having trouble being comfortable with the percentage, my recommendation might be that we be more forgiving on that percentage and make it a lower number. Again, we're putting something forward to address the moratorium and get this through in that time frame. We know that we are going to be discussing other changes to the zoning code, other changes within the CBD. If at that point in time, through that further discussion where we're making other changes, we determine that it makes sense to revise that number, we could do so at that time.
I would go the other way, make.
If you want to be, if you could go the other way and make it more restrictive. Yeah, it feels like we were not comfortable with a number. And so generally if you're not comfortable with something, a smaller change is better. But whatever makes sense to you.
We'll read it verbatim, with the commercial use definition doesn't specify a particular size. It's basically goods to the consumer. And it shall not include industrial and all those other kinds of things. So it doesn't talk about how big. So you could have something the size of this table selling coffee, right? And that would fit the definition. So there's a couple of ways that I would suggest. 4, I like the way that we're talking about striking the first few words of 4 and keeping it in. Jeff, you convinced me that 3 and 4 have merit. Something needs to happen there. If we wanted to go less, we could go subjective wording, like a majority needs to be retail. If we as a group wanted to go more stringent, then if there's another word besides an exact percentage, and then we go and we do the research and we revise another day to say, okay, we're gonna make it even more specific once we define it in words. I don't know what those words are.
I mean, I like coming up with a more restrictive exact percentage, and then if it's specific word, you can always relax it. That's just how I work. So, and I like having three, maybe, I can be 60 or plus. And I like to use the commercial, and I like 4, which you take out the maximum, and you just have a special land use for the company. I don't know.
Your number on 3.
Who say that?
All right, so I'm gonna share with the group my thinking on this, which is, I think 60, if we're gonna come up with something subjective and then go back and look at it, we might as well say that we can go back and change 60% if we want. We should, just follow up on that. So I would say, let's make it, this is my thoughts. I'd like to get everybody's reaction to it. Let's keep it 60%. Let's change the retail to commercial. Let's make special land use the governor for item number 4. If you want to have it be redundant, just to re-emphasize the point that it's an SLU, then that's fine. And then also I would recommend that we absolutely put back in the caveat about rooftop and camp. Yeah. That's kind of where I see, basically singing everybody. I think that's might not be if everybody has these, but it's kind of a little Goldilocks thing, kind of just right. So that's where I come.
Can I walk through the chairs? I think what you're suggesting, just so I'm clear. So it would be on page 4. Under the parking spaces, we would change for CBD from A to S.
Right.
We would put back in, we'd keep it at 30 feet, the maximum height, but we'd add back in the rooftop mechanical can protrude 42 inches above the 30 feet.
Yep.
Okay. And then on page 5.
Keep it not visible from
The not visible language would say too. So basically that language would go back in as was written, except changing 35 to 30. Page 5, number 3 there under B. We change retail or public use just to use for commercial use.
Commercial or public use.
Or do we want to keep public?
I think public.
Okay,
Museums, whatever.
okay. And then number 4, we just strike a maximum of 25% of, and then that subparagraph would start at the, go from there.
That's pretty much what it's.
Okay, and changing, it's gonna be upper floor, not upper floors.
On both 3 and
Yep.
4.
Yep.
Well, I do have a question on that. I'm sorry but we do have some buildings downtown that are taller than 2 stories, that are 3. The bank building, the cottage company building. Does removing upper floors, does that negatively affect those situations in any way, or does it not matter?
It might, and I don't think it hurts to have it be plural. It may be grammatically not correct, but I don't think it hurts anything from the zoning ordinance perspective.
I don't want it to insinuate that, yes, you could go above.
I don't think it does, because if you refer back to the table, it says the maximum number of floors.
I would think that minimum stories 2 and maximum height 30 would should mitigate that.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So we went from 35 feet, but it would have been 35 feet, 42 inches above to allow for a rooftop.
Yes.
But now we're 30 feet, but still 42 inches, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, same thing, because it's inches, got it.
Yep. Yep.
Got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
I just found that though, Mr. Lane, is 42 appropriate?
It is. That's a standard for a commercial air conditioning unit or an elevator shaft. So yes, 42 inches is standard.
Then how long would it take to get the data as far as the average retail space on the ground floor?
I can see what I can come up with in, before next month's meeting.
Just to, so we can adjust. If we need to.
That's a good question.
All right. Can I get a?
I motion to approve the changes subject to the special, changing CBD to special use, adding the 42 inches back in, and changing retail to commercial on number 3, item 3, and editing item 4 to say just subject to approval as special use permit under Article 9 of the ordinance.
And Mark, if I could just clarify, so the proper action that we would take if we're ready would be that we're making a recommendation to send this language with these edits to city council for their adoption.
In addition, we're approving these changes to go to city council for adoption.
Well, I think we have to clarify, Mark, I thought we said commercial or public, number 1.
Oh, that's what, yeah, yes.
And just striking a maximum of 20%, 25% of on 4 to start that sentence with the ground floor, and everything else stays the
Perfect.
same. Going back to 4, 30 feet, everything else stays the same, 30 feet, mechanical on 42. So yeah, if that's what you meant, I'm okay with that, but
Thank you for the clarification, that's what I meant.
Garen, was that a second?
unless. Go for it. Sure, I'll second that. I thought you had something to add to that.
That was the second about what you're doing.
I think with this, we'll do a roll call vote.
I think.
Garen Goppigan.
Yeah.
Chip Everest. Tony Johnson.
My vote's gonna be no. I'm gonna clarify that now or later.
I'd love to hear.
And that's, I agree with everything we have. I'm going to acquiesce on the 30 feet. I just would like to see it the maximum stories removed completely as it was previously.
Kenny Stewart.
Yes.
Jeannie Benjamin.
Yes.
Bob Buckner.
Yes.
Barry Lustgarten.
Yeah.
Mark Finkelstein.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay.
Did you care? Do you want to make formal assignment to Ken to go do some research?
And we could go do some research.
The support the 60%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or at least determine whether that's.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay,
To determine guidance for that number.
absolutely.
Don't prove or disprove a number.
Okay.
Okay. So moving on to the next item on the agenda. Which is short-term rental regulations. So. I think to kick this off, this is a big topic. I think to kick this off, there are a couple of things I'd like to mention. Number one. So the planning commission consider this is if we do not come up with language. By October. Then this, whatever policy we come up with will not be implemented in time for 2027. So there'll be a one year delay. Before whatever it is we come up with can be implemented. Because the licensing starts in November, right?
Yeah.
Renewals.
So I mean, certainly, if we do something mid-year, there's always the possibility, but yes, if for optimal moving forward, we start sending out our letters to short-term rental property owners or license holders in November 1st with a deadline to renew their license by December 1st moving forward. So yes, if we could get something in place by the end of October, that would be optimal. And just to provide some further background on the timeline, I did send everybody a link to a webinar that's coming up on October 6th. I'd like to just reiterate and encourage anybody that to participate in that. I think we can get a lot of good information from that to help us. My thought is, Mr. Chair, if you'd like to do this, but that we use the August meeting today and the September meeting to formulate and get an idea of what types of changes the community would like to see in our short-term rental policy and ordinance, and what the Planning Commission sees as a goal or things for us to then work on. We can have that in our back pocket when we attend this webinar on October 6th and gain some ideas of how we could then implement those thoughts, to then come back at the October meeting and kind of create what we would like to create and make a recommendation to City Council that they could then potentially take action on at their in October as well. Just as October 6th is I believe the webinar.
You said we're done by October?
Well, I think by the end of October would be optimal. If we're not, we're not. I mean, I don't want to say we have to do this, but it would help us to be able to fully implement the changes that we make when renewing licenses for 2027.
Based on those issues, those changes.
I don't know that I have an answer for that right now. I think I'd have to ask our city attorney for some clarification.
Where I'm going with my comments is I'd like to try and at least get committee members to commit to at least trying to deliver a final product by the end of October. Yeah.
Just for context, what issues are we tasked with addressing? What's not working?
Well, we're gonna, I got a feeling we're gonna hear a little bit about that in just a minute.
Okay.
And I've got some thoughts as well. You know, John is this here and here, John's part, and he's been good enough to share with me some of the research he's done. And so before we do that though, Jeff, would it be appropriate for you to maybe just briefly summarize what the current state of the short-term rental laws are and what governs the process today?
Yeah. So we have a short-term rental ordinance. It's in the city code. So it's under the purview of the clerk and the city council. The short-term rental ordinance requires that any property that wants to participate in short-term rental activity, which we have defined as a rental for a period of time or stay of 30 days or less, or any property in town is required to have a license regardless of what district they are in. We have a limitation on the number of licenses that are available in single-family neighborhoods at this time, R1 and RA. We do not have a limitation on the number of licenses in our business districts, such as the CBD, or B1, B2, or the multifamily neighborhoods like RM or R2. My understanding from previous Planning Commission discussions was the reason for that was to limit the number of short-term licenses that would be in single-family neighborhoods. We recognize that short-term rental is a commercial use of property. That kind of gives us the ability to have these regulations. And by not implementing a limit on the number of licenses available in the commercial areas was to entice them to go in that direction. Not to say that creating a limit in the future, if that's the direction that we get from the community, we could still do that. Is that what you were looking for? Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to suggest that we open this topic up for public comment. Anybody in the audience that would like to offer a motion? We need a motion?
This is not a public hearing. This is just a discussion, but good question.
Anybody in the audience that would like to provide their thoughts on this topic?
Really?
I assume. I'm Jonathan Wayman, 43 East 3rd Street, up against the bluff and on the looking at angles. We need your help. And based on what I just heard, I think you're gonna have to be dealing with this issue on a piecemeal basis, because it's enough complicated that you're not gonna get it all done by the deadline that you're hoping to meet. The short-term rental ordinance is easily gained, is not enforceable, does not motivate compliance, and is an example of a deviation from the master plan, which calls for family-friendly residential neighborhoods. Next to us, up against the bluff, was a rental business that lasted for about a year. Here are some of the problems our neighborhood has experienced. A house break-in. Chief Knight believed it was related to the rental. A fire being started adjacent to the bluff on a red flag warning day. An accelerant being used by a different tenant to start a fire near the bluff that could be seen over the roof of the house, with wood that may very well have come from our property. Because of these and others, we ended up having to build a solid fence between our property and the rental at no insignificant expense. In addition, across the street from us now, there's a small house with no driveway, sold to a family from Colorado about a year and a half ago to use, we were told, as a retreat for Colorado parents and two daughters who live outside of Michigan, but close to Michigan. To keep this under 3 minutes, and I'm going to come close, I'll provide you with my opinions based on facts I've witnessed or what I've been told. It too is a business rental. It's not a family retreat. The agent knowingly violated the ordinance. From the beginning, the property was advertised on a daily basis. It has continued to be rented on a short-term basis without a license. Tenants have been coached on what to say and facts misrepresented to the city, all while the agent was advertising management of investment properties. Enforcement is the principal problem, and I think is the first piece that I think you have to deal with on a interim basis, and then deal with the tougher issues of hosted versus unhosted properties. On complaint, the city observed it was too time consuming to investigate. And in defense of the city, that was when you guys were going crazy on the zoning ordinance at the time, and too expensive to go to court. No citation was issued. Chief Knight was eventually involved. He caught the agent misrepresenting facts and set up a meeting with all involved. A different agent appeared and said, quote, "It was a mistake," close quote, "It won't happen again." No citation was issued as a result. But apparently it has happened again by two different non-car rental Michigan plates over 2 weekends appearing. The chief looked into it and was told it was family, though there is no immediate family in Michigan. There is no further inquiry and no citation issued. Importantly, on my inquiry with the chief, given the history, Chief Knight said to the effect that he was not authorized by the ordinance to investigate further. And by the way, I checked with him to make sure that that was a fair representation of our conversation, and he said it was. Other towns use the rebuttable presumption enforcement model that shifts the burden to the owner to prove compliance once there have been a showing of facts like ours. Jeff would be happy with that, by the way, I think. According to this model, it ends up resolving the enforcement issue while essentially limiting the burden on the city. Finally, on the issue of application for a license, which this property owner has made, the neighbors will not be given notice and opportunity to explain why the license shouldn't be granted. Business rentals do not belong in residential areas. I and our neighbors ask that you adopt the rebuttable presumption model and correct the deficiencies in the ordinance consistent with the city's master plan. And in addition, you're going to have to be dealing with the issue of hosted versus non-hosted properties, which is a tough issue. It's business rentals versus cottage rentals, and that's going to take some time. Thank you for your time, and I hope I came close to 3 minutes.
Pretty good. Way over.
Jeff, can I make a quick question or comment? Is that appropriate? Sure. The city does not grant short-term licenses to businesses, corporations, LLCs, or trusts. Is that true?
Yes, but let me caveat that. We only issue a license to an individual person. And that's one of the ways that we make sure to ensure that licenses cannot change hands. If Jeff Grimm as an individual has the license and I have my property, we tie those two things together. If 123 LLC owns the license with the property, then Jeff Grimm can just sell 123 LLC to Mark, and now the license hasn't changed hands, but the ownership and use of it has. And so that's the method that we have done to do that. However, we do allow the local agent to be the applicant and submit on the owner's behalf. So we have some rental management companies in town that manage those properties. So the license is in the individual person's name, but we may have a rental management company that is operating that for them on their behalf, acting as their local agent.
Got it, but isn't one of the paper requirements that they also give you at the time of application, a copy of the deed showing ownership?
Yes, so
That should say LLC, trust, corporation. Right?
but it's not to stop a property that's in an LLC from having a license. It's to make sure that the license holder is an individual, not an LLC. So for instance, if I have my property in an LLC, it might just be an LLC to protect my interest, or a trust to protect my interest for legal purposes. But if I'm the sole owner and caretaker of that LLC, we would issue the license to the individual person, not the LLC. I would be very careful to talk about not allowing LLCs or any type of entity or property that's held by them, because we have a lot of property in Harbor Springs that it's just somebody's personal residence, but for their legal protection, they have it in an LLC.
Or trust.
Or a trust. So I would just be careful that we don't go down that route.
And I'm not suggesting
yeah.
we do, I'm saying that's what was adopted in 23, so it's interesting.
And if you look at the language that we have there, we have the rules and regulations, I believe. So we included in the packet the application, the language from the code, a copy of the rules and regulations document. And so what we would do in that scenario where, let's say that the property is held in a deed by an LLC, we would require that property owner to submit documentation proving that they are at least 50% or more owner in that LLC, and that hasn't changed hands. And that's our way of ensuring that the license is held by an individual and that LLC has not been transferred to a new person.
Thank you. Point of order, we're still in public comment.
We are.
Yes.
So, in that context,
Linda Rockwitz, 519 East Third Street. I feel very selfish saying this, but I would like to see residential short-term rentals in residential areas eliminated. And of course, we've got them now. So my suggestion would be we limit as those 63 licenses change are one by one eliminated. Then, and the 15 or 16 people on the waiting list, those people have made a financial commitment. They've done, we don't want to take away their rights. But when that's done, let's say no more in residential areas. It's just we're struggling so to preserve the charm of our small town. And that just seems like a way to do it. The more people who are not renters we have, I think the better off our town will be. Thank you.
yes.
Hello, my name is Gretchen Marsh. I live at 481 East Third Street. I'm John's neighbor and Linda's neighbor. I just wanted to ask the committee to review a city or a town, much like ours, in the East Hamptons called Montauk. They have one of the most restrictive short-term rental markets in the United States, and they do it very well. They have policies in place, they have implementations, permitting processes, a rental registry, and they have the community that works together with the fire department, the city commission, and the police department to make sure that the rules are followed. I don't think we have that here. We have concerned neighbors that bring this issue up, but we don't have a lot of support from our infrastructures like our city council and our police department. And I'm not trying to diss them because I know that they're working hard, but I just think we need more regulation and more input from our community leaders to help prevent this from growing into a bigger problem than it already is. And so that would be my recommendation for you all to kind of look at that program and see what they're doing and how they implemented it and how they're making it work. Because it's a lot like our city. It's a very beautiful little resort town in the East Hamptons, and they have really restrictive rules, and they have a lot of fines, and people follow the rules. So just something to think about.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Rick Darchinsky, 465 State Street. I too would like to see short-term rentals out of residential districts. They're not good neighbors, basically. I live next door to one. They don't maintain their property. I'm continually complaining about weeds up to my knees. They don't ever take care of the property. They're not supervised. They're only supposed to have, I think, 6 people, and there'll be 10 and 12 people staying there. We have no enforcement at all, no way to check on that. So I think they should be gone. As Jeff said, they're a commercial enterprise in the residential district. That means they should have to have an okay from the neighbors, special use, because it's not the proper use of that property for that district. So I think if we keep them, they need to go through a special use process and get approval. Thank you.
Wendy Reed, 539 East Bluff Drive. I have a short-term rental right next door to me on the bluff. And if everyone was run the way Peggy Bood runs hers, there would be no problems. It is $1,650 a night, I believe. It's not rented often. And the people who stay there, I've been lovely and quiet, but Peggy's rule is I have to know you or I have to know someone who knows you. She tells me she turns down 20 requests for everyone she accepts. However, then there is Birch Court, which someone was complaining to me this summer, that there's a circle of maybe 10 homes. They have a short-term rental in their neighborhood, and it turns over about every 1, 2, 3 days. That would be very uncomfortable to be in that neighborhood and have a stranger next door to you continuously. And then there's a story I've heard about there's 5 short-term rentals on State Street, I believe. And it got rented to what sounds like a group of frat boys, and they decided to have a literal pissing contest on front lawn. So the difference, it seems to me, is that the short-term rental is managed by someone who lives in town and is in town when it's rented and takes care personally of their property rather than a management company, because the management company is paid for it to be rented. So it's in their interest to make sure it stays rented. They don't really care about the quality of the tenant. They just care that they don't get any complaints. But then that means the neighbors are constantly having to monitor what's going on there. That seems to, if we could eliminate corporations owning rentals in town when there's nobody here, that might solve some of this problem.
Here in Outfield, West Travis Township. So Birchwood eliminated short-term rentals within about 6 months. And they took everyone by surprise. It was brought to their attention by a couple homeowners. They didn't do a survey. They didn't really find out how everyone felt. And there was such divisive issues. People had just bought homes, redone them, gotten them ready for short-term rentals, and it was a mess. The planning commission has been approached by the watershed, it's a committee or watershed group,
Council.
a couple times about the sewers. A lot of these homes aren't built for 5 bedrooms and 4 bedrooms. So I know that they have an interest in short-term rentals. That might be something to check. The flips, when they go to every 2 days, that means you have lawn care, you have maids and all those people. And then you have strangers, like Wendy said. And so there's all these little details, but I think that there's so many people in town that have lots of details that if they could share some of their concerns about short-term rentals, you might end up with a great amount of material on it. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Okay, let's close the public comment and to emphasize what Karen just said, obviously we're all ears when it comes to suggestions from citizens, so we'd love to hear that. I'm going to suggest to the committee that we kind of handle this the way we talked about trying to resolve language for the central business district, in that it's such a big topic. And I think we just need to get everybody to throw out ideas. And I don't know whether we can ask you, Ken, to consolidate those ideas and maybe come back to us after you've incorporated some of the thinking and look for commonalities, things that where there's synergy behind a couple of ideas, things that are just outliers, so that we can determine what seems to be a good idea, at least among all of the planning commission members, and then also then explore some of the more outlier ideas as well. I've done a reasonable amount of research on this, and I have some thoughts on it. If you guys wouldn't mind my sharing my thoughts at this point in time.
Can I ask one question about how this whole thing works? If I get a license for a short-term rental, do I get a booklet for rules and regulations, or how do I know?
Yeah. So whenever we receive an application, we review it. We, if they qualify, if there isn't a wait list in front of them, we then send them an email stating you have been granted a license. We send them copies of the rules and regulations. There's also
regulations that's part of the ordinance, or
so there's the actual ordinance language, the section of the code of the city code, and then we have a separate rules and regulations document that's also provided to them. And then in addition to that, we also have it's like a pamphlet flyer, a Be a Good Neighbor document. We ask that the applicant make that available to the people that stay. We also require that they put something on or near their door with the contact information for the local agent. So if a neighbor has a concern, they may reach out and contact them about the property, or contact us and we can get in touch with the local agent if needed.
So this is just kind of free-flowing, top of mind. I just put these points down that I'm going to share with everyone. I'd like you all consider them. None of these are, in my opinion, golden ideas, just kind of what I consider. So the first point is the obvious one, which is we need to consider the obvious conflict between short-term rental disruptions and property owner rights. Right? I mean, they are directly in opposition to one another. And so whatever we come up with, I think we need to be mindful of that. Currently, short-term rentals, as I understand it, are 30 days or less. I wonder whether we might want to think about, particularly to address the issue of turnover on short-term rentals, should there be a minimum stay of the staff? Just thinking out loud. Right now, occupancy is no more than 2 persons per bedroom, so we need to figure out how we're going to enforce that. I do agree with John that it appears to me that the biggest problem with leasing short-term rentals is just complete understaffing as far as resources to go out and check out what's going on with these short-term rentals, to verify that what is being alleged to be happening is actually happening, and then, you know, doing something to stop it. And so I do like the idea of shifting to a rebuttal presumption for enforcement to make it easier to rein in low tenants. And there have been a number of examples where municipality establishes a threshold set of observable facts, and then once those facts are shown, the burden shifts to the property owner to disprove the violation. And that would be a lot easier for Jeff and Kyle, obviously. The property owner has the right, as I understand it, under that circumstance, to rebut any claims in court. And as long as they present clear and convincing evidence that they are not renting improperly, then they're not charged with anything. I don't know what our policy is, Jeff, on record keeping, but I think perhaps making sure that we make that a little bit more regimented, a guest log for every stay, names, addresses, dates, numbers of occupants, and so on. I've got a lot of ideas on that. And then the penalties for violations, you know, I think the penalties right now for a violation are what, $250?
Yeah, so a first-time violation fee is $250. A second-time violation fee is $400. Yeah. Another thing that I would like to add is regarding our licensed short-term rentals, I don't really think that we have that many complaints about the licensed ones. I think what we really seem to have is our concerns and complaints regarding the properties that are acting as short-term rentals that aren't licensed, right? That seems to be where we're seeing more of the issues, and we're getting into more of the concerns about enforcement. With that said, I think I need to caveat and break that down, that I think there's 2 types of concerns and complaints. One is the overall arching concern or complaint about how short-term rentals seem to change the character of the community, right? And so we looked at instituting, and that's partly where we came up with the limit of short-term rentals in single-family neighborhoods to try and minimize that negative impact that it has on the character of the community. The other type of complaint would be complaints regarding nuisances like noise, parking, garbage, unattended fires, you know, things of that nature. So having different types of structure to your ordinance to address those 2 different types of concerns is something to look at. And yes, I think having more ability to talk about some of the things you mentioned and Mr. Wayman, anything to help us make enforcement easier, especially with the low staffing that we have, would definitely be a benefit.
So the comments I just made were not intended to start formulating policy or anything like that. It's kind of a brain dump on some of the things that I've been considering since we were tasked with the goal of trying to. So they are intended as a springboard, get us out of the starting blocks. But I'd love to hear everybody else's thoughts. So we can.
One quick question, do some of the real estate management companies represent homeowners that do not have a license, actually promote it without a license?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, maybe have them have some liability associated with.
Skin in the game.
Their game. I mean,
And that's a question on the enforcement side. I have asked that question. You know, we certainly have the ability to apply a fee to a homeowner. I have the question of, do we have the ability to find the rental management company themselves? And I should caveat, not all of the rental management companies are bad. Some of them are very good. Some of the rental management companies do an amazing job of keeping the properties in line and minimizing the negative impact on neighbors, like Wendy mentioned with you know, Peggy Abood. So, but there are some that are not doing as well of a job.
Instead of imposing a fee, removing the license. I don't know why we're keeping licenses there.
Well,
people without a license.
And he was referring to a rental management company listing a property for use as a short-term rental when it doesn't have a license. I just wanted to caveat that, yeah.
One question from Mr. Wayne. Is this a 4-month problem or a 12-month problem, as you see it?
I think it's, for us, it's an everyday problem.
All year?
Well, yes, I mean, for example, the little place across the street from us now didn't have a driveway. So what the agent did was come in and plow the driveway. And there's a specific provision in the short-term rental ordinance that says you can't do that.
Okay, so as we try to solve this, we should be thinking about non-summer. I mean, it's a bigger problem based on the summer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so my other question is, and Jeff, maybe you could help with this. What are the mechanisms that are often used for advertising? Is it online or is it through a real estate company, or what have you seen and experienced?
All of it.
I think that there are many different ways that people advertise. Sometimes it's just word of mouth. That's the hardest to track down. I would say that the majority of short-term rentals are advertised on some type of a website like Airbnb or VRBO. And that's probably it's one of the methods that we have of trying to track and find short-term rentals is we can work with companies that will scrape those websites, find the advertisements, provide us with that information. And when we find that, that's an easy way to document and say, you've been advertising as a short-term rental, here's your fine, right? It's very difficult when it's just word of mouth. I don't advertise, but I know, or maybe situations where I just have the same family or same families come and use my property, and so I don't advertise anymore. It becomes more difficult in those situations.
I dropped this off on all of your desks, I think. So when you see this, this is from me. And what it is an AI research on the issues that we're now discussing that basically discusses most of the issues. And I would find an authorship having nothing to do with it. And you're to review it at your convenience. And it's not complete. The issue of business, which was just discussed, I used in a general term, not as an LLC, as a corporation, because I can walk in and run a business, buy a house next to me, and run it and under my name. So the business issue is just how much it's used. That raises the issue of, do you want to cap the amount of rentals in residential areas that have licenses? For those who are renting, this little place across the street from us has been renting for a year and a half without a license, is they gotta be stopped. And to your point, Mr. Buckner, and in these materials, you see the rebuttable presumption and the things that you look for and what the owner has to come forward to and give to Jeff to say, here we are. It's not a short-term rental. It's more than 30 days. And with the log that you just discussed, you can call the agent or call the tenant and say, hi, I'm Jeff from the city, and you're there for 30 days, is that right? And things such as that. So it provides the city with the rebuttable presumption model, provides the city with the ability to be able to get at it fast and make the decision. And when it comes down to it, you've got to write the ticket, and you've got to be able to go to court if somebody threatens you with going to court if they don't like the ticket.
I'd like to thank you for that. But we did close public comment, so.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
oh, Jeannie, you go ahead, Jeannie.
A few things go through my brain. If I'm remembering correctly, when we did this, short-term rental a while ago, that it was when there were a lot of different communities who are all kind of questioning, what do we do with this? So I think it's a good time to see what has happened, and maybe we've gone too far. And having said that, it'd be nice to see, so we have given out 60 licenses. But there are over, I'm not clear on. where they
more
are
than
when
60.
we talk about-
Yeah.
Is there a way to to show us a map at some point to just say, okay, these are where they are, so that we have a better idea of maybe we need to cut, 10% there and scale it down and kind of start over as well. And the only other comment that, two things, the enforcement end of it, and those who, I have very good friends who rent, but it's always a friend, it's a lot like Peggy's. And I think if when you own a home and use the home, there's something to be said for that. But if you are an absentee owner and just renting, and I don't know how you police that. But I think those are the primary things if you ask. I mean, there's a lot to talk about, those of you where I was going to.
So there's a couple points there I'd like to mention. So one, I can absolutely, for our next meeting, prepare a map that will show where the licensed short-term rentals are in town. We did that before and we can do that again. And a little bit of background. So when we originally created our short-term rental license or started this process, I think it was back in 2018 or 2019. And we went to some seminars, we went to some webinars. There were a lot of great resources, but a lot of Northern Michigan communities were starting to look at enforcement and regulation at that time. So it was kind of new. We did do some due diligence and research to come up with what was best for the city. And I do think that the structure that we've created with our license is a really good backbone structure. Certainly we need to relook at it and moving forward, but I think it provided us with a good skeleton that we can hang new regulations on, I guess. Let me clarify, you mentioned 63. So 63 is the limit to the number of licenses that can be in single-family residential neighborhoods. We have another approximately 40 some that are in the CBD, the other business neighborhoods. So the total number of licenses is closer to, let's say, approximately 100, give or take. I'll have more firm numbers for you. I'll even provide a breakdown of how many in each district for us at the next meeting. So.
Yeah, I had two thoughts, I'm not gonna remember one right now, but, I think there's, of course, we all agree there's lots of things we need to talk about here, and I don't know which one we're gonna try and address between now and October. But it seems like the low-hanging fruit is the unlicensed properties. And I'm interested what our level of enforcement is there and what success we've had with, and what avenues we have to address that, and specifically then, has that been successful? And then the other question, maybe we'll come back to.
We work with a company that, like I mentioned, that scrapes the internet and finds these. I do think that we are pretty successful. None of the companies out there that provide this assistance advertise 100%, success, right? They all say we'll get you to 80% compliance, 90% compliance, things like that. There's going to be those leftover ones, and really that's where we're seeing the trouble. I would bet that we're pretty high on our compliance with the number of short-term rentals compared to the number of them that are licensed. I don't think we have too many that are acting without licenses, but we do have a few that are troublesome. And the issue has been for some of them verifying that they're not in compliance. And this goes back to an issue of when we created the license to begin with. Prior to 2018, we didn't have any short-term rental license. It was simply all property owners could rent their properties however they liked, but we had a limit. You couldn't rent for less than 7 days. but that was very difficult to try and enforce. How do you verify that? And then we even got into situations where somebody, had people there for a 3 or 4 day weekend, but then they said, but here's our lease for 7 days. They only stayed for 3. We can't control that, but they rented it for 7. So, and we really felt that the issue wasn't the duration of stay, it was the behavior while they were staying. And so the idea was, let's try and address those issues. And that's what helped create what we have. But it's running into these problems where you look at the Airbnb listing and it says that you cannot rent for less than 30 days. You try and book a stay for less than 30 days and you can't. But when you visit that property every weekend, there's different people there. And it's, how do you prove? And then you get them saying, well, that's, the same person rented it for the whole month, but they were there for a weekend, their brother was there for the next. And, so there are aspects of it that are difficult. And I want to look into John's thought and that you guys have mentioned with that new method of shifting some of the burden of proof. I think that might really greatly help us with enforcement. Yeah. And realistically, we're talking about a minority of properties that are creating the noise that is making the community unhappy about this. So it's certainly something that is addressable. Unfortunately, it takes more time and resources to be able to do that.
One follow-up question, and then I'll try to put them up. So are we defining a short-term rental? I mean, this seems like an obvious question, as a commercial or a financial transaction, as opposed, so I guess what I'm trying to say is, I own a house and I don't live here full time. I do in this example, and I let friends come and stay for the weekend. How do we address that? That's kind of outside of rentals. So we could potentially have the same issues there.
And that's definitely part of the enforcement issue. I would say at least half of the concerns or complaints that we get regarding a short-term rental, we get the call, hey, the next door neighbor to me is doing a short-term rental. And then we show up to investigate and it's the property owner that's there. They're just having a bunch of friends over for a party. So because of the resort nature of Harbor Springs, it makes it a little bit more difficult. So yeah.
Barry, do you have any thoughts on this? Yeah, and sorry.
Yeah, my question is to Jeff, is how many unlicensed situations have we run into? And then of the ones that are licensed, how many complaints have we got?
For licensed properties, like I said, I don't think we get a lot of complaints because when it's licensed, we have that hammer of saying, if you don't address the situation, we're going to yank your license. So we did have one property that we had some concerns. We did call them in. We have the ability to have a hearing. We told them that they needed to address issues or we were going to pull their license. And we've had less issues with them. I think there are still a couple small details that are problems. More it's unlicensed properties. And realistically, I know of one where I think we're pretty sure that it's a short-term rental. We just can't really prove it. We have another one where we are going through a process, and I'm not sure where we are in that process where I've informed the police and the attorney that, hey, here's the proof that they're renting and we should find them. So.
I mean, that's a problem. It's a lot easier to enforce. People are licensed. I mean, what is the hammer that we can do for these unlicensed? Because that's just unacceptable behavior in our city.
Yeah. Again, it comes back to the difficulty of, we have to have sufficient proof to be able to write that citation. And if they challenge that citation, to have a judge agree with us that short-term rental activity did take place. And that's kind of the difficulty. The hammer is you operated a short-term rental without a license. Here's your first time, fee of $250. You did it again. Here's your second time fee of $400. I think one of the difficulties there, and something that we can address, is when I'm renting for $1,400 per night for 7 days, I've just made a profit of $5,000. What is a fine of $400 mean to me?
I mean, that was my point. Why, if you're on the license, why isn't it a $5,000 fine?
Well, we have one thing that we have to keep in mind is we are limited where the fines and the costs that we have for the services that the city provides have to be tied to our cost to administer. So it's difficult for us to throw out a $5,000 or a $10,000 fine. We have to also be able to justify that we spent X amount of money in doing that to justify the need for them to pay that cost of a license or a fine for acting without.
And then follow up with Bob's rebuttal thing, would that work with non-licensed homes?
We have to research and make sure that whatever fines and penalties or costs for providing a license is something that we can justify as an appropriate expense. We have to look into what leeway we have. We probably have more leeway on the fine side than we do the license cost for the license, but I'd have to research that more before I could give you a better answer, I guess.
Because I mean, for, doing a fine on a licensed thing, I mean, they have a legal right to do certain things. They had, they got a fine, but when someone's running out, it's actually illegal. Seems like there's just could be more of a severe penalty if it's illegal.
Yeah. And that's something we can look at. We just have to be careful that a court couldn't interpret our fines as a revenue generating source, because we have control over how municipalities can generate revenue. I think if you're getting into the timing of when they're paying their fee or how they're paying their fee, I don't think we could just automatically put it there. But if we issued a fine and they weren't paying it, there might be the potential that that's a route we could take. But
Find the real estate.
Yeah.
I think we need to look into what's permissible for us to do. Certainly.
Sure, yeah. I'm hearing the community correctly. It sounds like we have three problems at a high level. High turnover, excessive renters per residence, and noise and dangerous behaviors. If we just try to capitalize, okay, how do we solve those three? The illegals, all that, I think that's important. We're gonna have that no matter what, but if I hear the community, it seems like those are the three issues that are probably or should be top of mind for us to try to manage through code.
But I think it's bigger, it is all of those things, but it is also what it does to the character of the town. So working downtown every day, I can tell you it's never been busier. And everybody says, that's great. Yes, if you like ice cream and coffee, I mean, there's more garbage, it's really, there's the law of diminishing returns. I mean, at what point? And so, yes, you have everything we're talking about, but we also have how much we don't want to keep the community that we have. We want those who live here to be able to come into town, and if they don't, it's too busy. So I think you can't put up a gate. I totally get that. But I do think when we look at the number of licenses and we look at who's renting to real estate offices and then they don't have a license, I think that there's a lot that we need to look at that's bigger than this noise next door.
I think that's a good point. Where I would want to see data is how much of that is tourism and how much of it is renters.
And I think when I walk my dog, I've never picked up so much garbage in my life. I mean, and I walk into work, it's every, even city council, we had to have arrange for another garbage pickup because we had so there's a level of how much can we take? We're not that big.
I also think we shouldn't lose sight of Tony's point, which is maybe prioritizing the non-licensed short-term rentals, because if Jeff is correct, and I have no reason to suspect he's not,
it seems like the people who are following the rules are far less problematic than the ones who are non-licensed. So is that a fair statement?
We're generalizing, but I think that there's some accuracy there, yeah.
I do remember my other. It's a statement more than anything. And Wendy did relay one positive experience with short-term rentals. So I want to recognize that. But the discussion short-term rentals has been on today's agenda. I've heard people in the community talking about it. Other than the one story we heard from Wendy, I have not heard anybody here in support of short-term rentals. I'm not disclosing where I lay, but I just find that interesting and a good observation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but it's also nice to see lights on when I'm walking down Main Street or Second Street where I'm at. It's nice to see lights on, which you normally don't. I'm not advocating for it, I'm just playing both sides, but I mean, it is nice.
Yeah.
Nice to have a way to encourage long-term.
Right.
Yeah, that would be ideal.
Chip, where do you come out on this?
Well, I agree with Dwayne that seems to be a bigger problem. I don't think I've ever been once to so, but I also want to protect people's rights to do whatever they want to their house, and I think we need to be creative about how we get enforcement though, like this real estate. We need to give pain to people that aren't feeling pain right now. And maybe that would help do bring that out. Be creative on how we act. And I'm interested in how Montauk, New York.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing that I did not include in our packet, and it may have been a small neglect on my part, but there was a really good document that Chris Kukulski put together. I think he might have used some AI to help compile, but he uploaded our short-term rental information into AI and had it compare what we did to what other communities do. And he provided that as a report at one of the previous city council meetings. And that was a really good document because it showed what we did well, because there are some things that we do well. But it also showed us here are some areas where we could improve. And there were some other communities that are known to have good, strong short-term rental stuff. I'll make a note to include that in our packet for our next meeting as well. It was a good overview. It didn't get into specifics. It kind of just talked about, like, do you have this? Do you have this? And we checked many of the boxes, but it didn't get into specifics. And that's where we need to spend more time. Yeah.
Eddie, we haven't heard from you on this.
I'm not to the point of saying therefore we ought to do. I'm writing a bunch of notes, and I think, Ken, you got a bucket full of things that you've heard tonight, which is good. The other information that's coming around comes, one of my big takeaways is we just don't have the enforcement mechanism.
No question.
And that's problem. I'm guessing, Jeff, that might be the largest area that's a gap compared to other towns, but we need to be clear, we need to be simple, we need it to not burden either the city staff administratively or the police department, which is gonna be tricky. But we definitely are too light on a legal mechanism for recourse.
Yeah, I agree. Priorities, non-licensed short-term rentals, that would be number one priority. Number two, enforcement, the rebuttal presumption. And number three, should we consider a minimum stay to try and mitigate this turnover that occurs all the time? So we're 2.5 hours into this. I don't know that we're gonna get anything further accomplished. Ken, do you feel like you've got a good summary of what?
I do, and I think I've been taking notes, and I think I can put together those points and then send it out to the commissioners and say, you know, here's are the things we discussed, you know, elaborate on these points with what you think.
Or we should still send a bunch of stuff to them.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And Jeff, that document you were talking about would be really helpful. Anything else on short-term rental? Member comments. Cody's comment is I want to get out of here.
Yes.
All right, I have a comment, and I'm gonna be unpopular, Tony, I'm sorry. But looking at what we have here on due dates, shall we say, short-term rentals, signage. Circling back on some of the second tier issues on the zoning code. I think this is a really good team, a very knowledgeable team with now a lot of context for these issues. And November election is coming up, and then there's all that jump ball time. So I'd like us to consider doubling down on the meetings in September and October. What that would mean is keep the current meetings that are in place. But we would add a September 3rd meeting, which is 2 weeks away, and an October 1st meeting. Make them roughly every 2 weeks. And then return to some version of normalcy in November after the election, because those things have to work themselves out. Do I want to meet here on a gorgeous summer evening? No. But I also know that we have a lot of things that have some hard dates, so I open that up for discussion.
I think it's a good call.
I do too.
And we should recognize that that may not be convenient for every member. But as long as we have a quorum, I think we should keep going.
Should we do that as a vote
Everybody good with that?
to add 2 days?
September 3rd, not October 1st.
Yeah, that's what my math may not be correct, but I think that's September 3, October 1. It's that first Thursday.
Can we double your pay?
I'd love it.
Absolutely.
Actually, if we're entertaining that idea, I think that might be best to do as a motion to add the dates of September 3 and October 1 to our calendar for special meetings.
Okay.
If that's something that we're,
So move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I won't be here September 3rd. We'll be back.
That's gonna happen.
All right, anything else? Member comments? Tony, would you like to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.